Hey guys, welcome to What's Over More or Less. I got a thought for you today on patriotism and investment or speculation, whatever you want to call it. But I want to do a quick addendum to my last video on the uniqueness of Article 2 and our chief executive. I had mentioned things such as, prior to that, no commander-in-chief had also had, I don't think I mentioned the veto power, but no commander-in-chief had also had diplomatic responsibilities or treaty powers. Take care clause, which the laws of the land, all that kind of stuff. But the big addendum I want to add is I don't think I mentioned that our commander-in-chief, something unique prior to that, is he has the power to call Congress into session on extraordinary occasions, convene them, right? And then if they can't make up their mind when to end that unusual session, if they can't come to an agreement, he can be the one that just casts the tie-breaking vote and tells them when they're done. And so he really does have a certain amount of legislative powers. It's one of the things the anti-federalists complain about. They recognized a lot about the power of the presidency. But again, remember, he can be checked by way of impeachment and conviction. He can be checked by way of defunding him through the power of the purse, and he can be checked. Well, he has to have 2/3 of the Senate for a lot of the things he does. There's something else I've got in there, but I can't remember what it is. I think one of the big ones, I always say Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11. If you look at the full context of the Constitution, that doesn't necessarily look like it's the primary means for defending America. It looks like it's the backup plan in case the president hasn't already noticed there's an issue going on. And I will make the case. Look at all the Native American tribes that were defeated, and please tell me how many times we declared war through Congress through that proper process, supposedly, before defeating them. Okay? You won't find it. Okay, so now moving on here. The thought is, President Oaks, in his talk, look it up, it's 2010, I want to say, Constitution Day, state of Utah, at the Tabernacle. So this isn't a church event, but there's a lot of church members. I would recommend looking at each of Dallin H. Oaks' major talks on the topic of the Constitution in recent years, plus his old ones, but the major ones in recent years. The way he spoke to law students at the University of Virginia as a guest lecturer versus the way he spoke to the entire globe in defending our divinely inspired Constitution, which I would recommend looking up the John Taylor quote on that one regarding when they shall have torn the Constitution to shreds, and just a recommended thing to look and see, considering that was the first general conference right after the 2020 elections. And then also the biggest one, though, is the Tabernacle one. I think that's the clearest one, where he's speaking to the state of Utah. Fundamentals of our constitutions, and I think that plural word is important. Look up the Wilford Woodruff quote, that we will be found living the Constitution even when the Constitution has been torn to shreds in other places. You will find us living it, okay? So just some considerations. I can get more into that later on. But in that talk, he says that we... One of the things he exhorts us to do, if we truly believe our constitutions are divinely inspired, and that's the concept, is one of the things is we should be patriotic. And I thought about that. I remember one of the first thoughts that came to my head is, the complaining about the Embargo Act that Thomas Jefferson had. And I thought to myself, the complaining about the Embargo Act, first off, that's a power granted to Congress to actually regulate commerce. And part of regulating can be shutting it off, especially in times of war and conflict. That would absolutely make sense. Saying, hey, you're going to have to restrict commerce to these regions. And yet there was complaint about it. Americans didn't die from the Embargo Act. As a matter of fact, I look at what happened about 100 years later, when there was war going on between Germany and Great Britain and these other regions. And we kept going over there and trading. And Germany, sure enough, ended up shooting one of our ships, as I understand it. And from that point, we decided, well, hey, we got to go to war with them now, right? So we got ourselves caught up in a cycle that often leads to the end of an overextended superpower type of nation. Okay, so while we might have enjoyed being a superpower for a long time, there's a point where nations who get themselves caught up in this kind of circumstances usually end up being overextended and then failing ultimately. The Embargo Act didn't lead to that. The Embargo Act was one of the best things in the world for the United States. Thomas Jefferson literally did some of the best things the United States could have ever had done. Literally, period. And but continuing, I think it was Wilson who had us continue going over there and trading while there was war going on over there. Gave us an excuse once Germany fired on one of our ships to begin meddling, become part of their global wars, and then makes us a superpower. And now we're involved in the Treaty of Versailles. Treaty of Versailles was, a fantastic thing, of course, because, why not, right? Why not set up the next World War so we can even become more of a superpower, right? That's literally what happened as a result. World War II, the punish on the Germans was insane. And we were partnered up with the Soviet Union, with Russia. We were partnered up with, literally people on the opposite side of the political spectrum. At the time, the Austro-Hungarian Republic was working on creating a constitution, a Republican form of government similar to ours. And instead, we supported the guys who became the communists. So that makes a lot of sense, right? Okay. So the Embargo Act, the evidence to me is when it was done, the fruits are good. And when it wasn't done, we got ourselves into the cycle of overextension, into the cycle of a Cold War. We supported the wrong side. Why am I bringing this up? That's the first thing that popped in my head, is these whiners about, the economy and stuff like that. You might be like, dude, what are you talking about, whiners about economy? Everybody knows the economy is the most important thing, right? Read the Constitution, dudes. Please read the Constitution. Jefferson is really interesting on that. His take on the spirit of speculation versus the agrarian lifestyle. Who's the more dependable people? The yeoman farmer is more honest, is harder working, and is more tied to the land and its well-being, more self-sufficient, doesn't need handouts from anybody, right? If he doesn't, he's more capable then too of helping his nation. Talk about being set up to be patriotic. And one of Jefferson's main concerns was the investment type of class, right? People who would get caught up in speculating would lead us into too many entangling alliances ultimately. And boy, wasn't he prophetic. What am I getting at? We've got high gas prices right now. Why do we have high gas prices? Because Americans are obsessed with investing in everything. We like to retire off of investments. Look, I'm not an expert on this stuff. I'm not going to pretend to be. But it's true, right? Some people straight up like to make their money off of investing, as a matter of fact. They don't even actually work for a living. They just invest for a living, right? Work smarter, not harder, right, is what they say. Let your money make your money for you, right? Whatever, dudes. I think at some point, the commandment, all the days of thy life, or was it only the first few days of your life you earn your bread by the sweat of your brow? I can't remember. Which was it again? Anyhow, look, dudes. There's a point I'm making here, is that there is benefits to actually growing something real. It's awkward, it's difficult, but you're capable. You feel less dependent on the government fixing everything for you, even if you're having a hard time doing it perfectly right, even if you feel awkward because it's skipped a couple generations in your family like most of us have. You start reading Jefferson enough, you start reading Ezra Taft Benson enough, and next thing you know, you can't help but be convinced, oh, these guys are right. I can see it. This is an important thing, and this doesn't mean you quit the workplace. This means, though, you become less reliant. I had a thought on what was it? I think even the Great Depression started because of failed investments or something like that, right? What about the Shays' Rebellion? It's this investment class of people wanting to take the land from farmers who had fought in the Revolutionary War. They got paid off with paper money, but the investment class wanted to get paid with the real money, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think, if you're obsessed with investments, if you're caught up in this kind of thing and you're not committed to working all the days of your lives, I am just concerned that might be a chink in your armor when it comes to your ability to be patriotic your entire life. Okay? These gas companies, I can't remember if I said this already or not. I was looking it up trying to understand it. So I guess it's an exchanged commodity. That means it's subject to investment laws, all that kind of stuff. You have to try to make maximum profit for all your investors. So even if America has plenty of oil that we're pumping for ourselves here, if the global prices have gone up higher, basically the oil is going to be getting sold to these other countries who need it and are willing to pay a higher price than Americans are, which then drives up the price that Americans are paying, and drives down the supply that we have available to us. So I don't understand all of it, but I know that Jefferson, again, speculation drove him crazy, and the people he trusted the most were the people who grew their own food. Oh, here's the one more big example. Researching the Civil War, I was looking into that because, again, I've made the case again and again, nothing gave Lincoln the right to do what he did in the Constitution. An honest constitutional student would say you're stretching the heck out of so many clauses in order to come to that conclusion, right? And again, I study the Constitution every day. Good luck beating me on this one. I welcome you to it. It's just not there, dudes. It's just not there. But let's come to the deeper point. The deeper point is the weakness of the South was they actually had better farming land for themselves than did the Northerners. But they were obsessed with making cash crops, maximum profits. And so since they were obsessed with that, Jefferson Davis and the South asked him, hey, can you guys stop focusing on cash crops and actually focus on making food? We're going to need food for our soldiers. Most of them didn't do it, or they only put hardly any effort, dedicated a couple acres to food, and then still wanted to make their cash crops. In other words, they wanted to separate from the Union, and they weren't prepared to pay the price of freedom by the sweat equity that was going to be required. Did the Constitution allow for them to do what it did? Yes, it did. Did they pay the price, though, when Lincoln violated the Constitution? Were they prepared to stand up for themselves? No, they weren't. That's the problem. So I think that in the end, why did the North win? Maybe one possible consideration is because of the Northern people, not because of anything righteous on the part of Lincoln. But the Northern people had adopted a better lifestyle, more consistent with the laws that God had given us from Genesis 1 onward, or from the early days of Genesis. Okay? They were more consistently growing their own food, even if they were also working in manufacturers and other stuff like that. They used their land for actually feeding their families rather than using their lands to try to make cash crops. And so, and the cash crops, I think it got the Southerners trapped into slavery too. So the evil of slavery was perpetuated because of cash crops, I'm pretty darn sure. So ultimately, the Southerners probably should have dedicated themselves more to being stewards of the land instead of profiteers. And that's their biggest weakness. I do believe, again, that the nullification was a power that wasn't mentioned in the Constitution, and if it's not mentioned, it's reserved to the states or the people. That's the plain text of the 10th Amendment, you guys. But they really should have been better contributors to society. And a better contributor to society, the evidence tells me, from history again and again, it's not the investment class, you guys. And if you're part of the investment class, no offense, dudes, but honestly, look at the record, bros. Look at the records. It's always profiteering that leads to all this stuff. Shays' Rebellion, Civil War failure on the part of the South, the need to nullify the Tariff Acts, in the first place that led to the nullification crisis. The failure of the South to be able to provide food for their own soldiers. The failure of the United States to stay out of Europe's business during World War I. It's always speculation. It's always speculation. So I am convinced that speculation and patriotism at some point are incompatible. That's all there is to it. And I am agreed with Thomas Jefferson. You know what the number one crop is that we grow in America, I'm pretty sure? It's lawns, you guys. How much are we using those lawns to feed livestock or to feed our family? Or are we just taking it and cutting it and then throwing it in the garbage? Are we putting poisons on it, putting stuff on it that makes it not even edible in the first place? And then do we support HOAs that prevent us from doing anything else in the first place, that mandate that we have a lawn, but we can't put livestock on it? If America is going to be maximally free, maximum freedom, as President Oak says, we have to be more like that agrarian society. We have to be more inclined to work all the days of our lives, earn our bread by the sweat of our brows all the days of our lives, and be happy with that. Be happy with multiplying, replenishing, and subduing the earth, working the land in such a way that it's not about maximum profit, but it's about creating a good life of health and a different kind of wealth. Anyhow, it's a little rant, but there was too many thoughts I couldn't help but notice we're connected again. Think about it, you guys. The failure of the South, even though the Constitution didn't prevent them from seceding. Their need to nullify the Tariff Acts in the first place. Shays' Rebellion and the investment class. The insistence on continuing to trade with Europe while there's a war going on. Now the current gas prices. Because everybody has to have their 401ks and their IRAs and blah, blah, blah. Because, maximum profits. Plus we've got all these international allowances for international investors. And plus we invest in international companies, compromising our own ability to stay loyal to ourselves and to stay patriotic. And, why does patriotism matter so much? If anything, our current prophet said it, I guess 16 years ago, whatever. He was a well-established apostle at that point. And so put country above self. Yes, put country above self. And again, I'll put out there again, Jefferson's 19-year rule, it modified throughout the years. It was more extreme when he was younger and he first started mentioning it. But the concept is solid. If we're doing anything that leaves the next generation with something harder than we have, we might want to reconsider our ways. So, all right, that's all I got, you guys. So be patriotic. If you're going to invest, I guess just consider the way you invest. Consider it. Be thoughtful investors. Think of all those guys that their insistence on making maximum profit led to so many different wars and conflicts. All right, thanks you guys. We'll see you.